So good morning to you, wherever you are. If you'd come into the front here, it'd be fantastic. Stand or take a seat, pay attention if you can. Welcome to day 4 of our World Dharma Mindful Intelligence and Meditation, Beautification of the Mind retreat. There are those few people here who've not been here yet. You're welcome as if you've not missed anything. We're here because we're choosing to be here. The retreat is designed to drop in. A few things, especially for those who are here for the first time. There's been a lot of emphasis on direct experience. I've used analogously the breathing as a way to understand the immediacy, things that perhaps you already know, but just to share, the immediacy of the process of life, being, B-E-I-N-G, being, immediacy. People use the word now, being present. I like immediacy and felt reality. I'm not going to judge that reality, but we use the second word here quite frequently. I do at least the word Dharma, the Sanskrit word, and the somewhat equivalent in the Pali language called Dhamma, D-H-A-M-M-A. The immediacy of felt reality on the terms of the Dharma. On the one hand, a courageous, careful, conscious willingness to challenge denigrating, afflictive states of consciousness. Essentially, the yogi, the Dharma savant, the Dhamma advocate, is taking, I would call, responsibility for her or his mind by empowering Dhamma. I'm essentially saying to you, I'm committed to being trustworthy. I will lie at times, but hold me accountable, because I am holding myself accountable. So pause. If I can, throughout the day with your notebooks if you want, remember that this book will be your transformational model. It'll be your mapping of your own liberation. Take notes so that you can refer to that in the process. The felt reality and the immediacy of being on the terms of the Dhamma or the Dharma, on the one hand, the courageous, conscious, mindfully intelligent awareness to show up with discernment, inquiry, patience, determination, resolve, ethical intelligence to discern, this state of mind does not serve me other than to create confusion and conflict. And although it's sort of groovy and juicy in a habitual state of mind, and I get away with being cunning and habitual a lot of the time, I'm going to intervene with that state. That's the Dharma, that's a yogi. Someone who's being self-responsible. At least to me. When I speak about trust and safety in relationship, when I personally speak about conscience and integrity, and of course the more overt expression of authenticity, it must, for me, be informed by intelligence, mindful intelligence, spiritual intelligence, ethical intelligence. I don't want you just to be natural to your own neurotic behavior. That's sort of the norm today. I want you to be accountable to something inside of your heart and source. And to me, the operating system of accountability is someone who can use the word Dharma as a felt transformational practice. I would say that he and she is a yogi. We okay? And equally, someone who's involved in Dhamma. I use those two words interchangeably. On the other hand, an individual or a girl or boy dedicated to the transformation of trustworthy presence. I'm accountable to the process of something, not just culture and human rights and psychological well-being, but I'm accountable to states of consciousness, the syntax of the soul. I want to know the language of the heart. Yeah? I want to demystify as much as possible for myself, my family, my friends, and those who come in my life, demystify this process of engaging consciousness on the terms of what liberates it from fear, greed, anger, delusion, patterns of hypocrisy, compromise, anything that denigrates space. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I think of Jesus, do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. It's a very simple etiquette. I don't want to be lied to. I don't want to lie. I don't want to be cheated on. I want to have a transparent relationship. So today I'd like to encourage the concept of radical honesty. I don't use the word radical very often, but I want to use it today and try to reach into it. The other corollary to overcoming afflictive states of mind is what we're doing here, simultaneous to that challenge, is to beautify. We spoke at some length for the last 3 days about the concept of beautification. It roots in the Pali word B-H-A-V-A-N-A, bhavana. This as a flower, opening to freedom. Here, beautification refers analogously and metaphorically to what does the human psyche and its source need to choose to nurture the opening. You figure out what opening means to you. I have a plan for me, what opening means to me. I would encourage each of us to accentuate the uniqueness of being a yogi. There are asanas, there are techniques, but everyone will do them differently. Each mind print, like a fingerprint, like a snowflake, I would think is very unique within this incredibly systems-based patterning of familiarity and consistency, seemingly, within the inner and outer ecosystem. But within it, infinite variations, it seems. That diversity is worth protecting. In the absence of that protection and regard, we have the arising of fascism, dictatorship, totalitarianism, and when really perceived as violating those unethical habits of the psyche, we will violate in the name of a lie. That's the fold of existence that we're born into on at least this planet. And so the yogi and the Dhamma or Dharma savant, someone who's thinking and feeling outside of the human psychological, cultural, political box, the savant, someone who is often an outcast, a misfit, the savant. I dare use the word autistic, outside of the box, these savants. Be a savant, be outside of the box, and be willing to, oh wow, this is really curious to me, to beautify, because it really is the environment that I want to live in. It's a very interesting turning of the mind. Maybe you've made that turning, maybe you're about to make that turning, maybe you will make that turning today. I don't have a judgment of that. The turning from foldedness to unfoldedness, unfoldingness. You can trust me. I do have my folds, but I also have a commitment to being in the intelligence of being a yogi. I don't want to hear just that you do yoga. I want to hear and feel in myself the intelligence. I use the word mindful intelligence, spiritual intelligence, emotional intelligence, environmental intelligence, sexual intelligence, to define a willingness to relax afflictive states of mind that denigrate you and other, and elevate beautiful states of mind. The soul, if I could speak of this process for me, is self-honesty. How could I be trustworthy without being honest? I won't ask for hands or shows of hands or just psychically reading each other. How many of us still live in the fold of that shadow, at thinking that deception is preferable than transparency? Think about all the ways in which we self-deceive to reinvent the lie, to appropriately champion deception and call it truth. How we believe our own propaganda. I would like to invite us within this opening and unfolding process to be willing to be that rare individual who goes, you know, I'm going to tread so lightly on this so-called truth that I'm going to really see actually if it actually is a truth. Maybe it's just a habit pattern. So I want to ask you, as we evolve the day, where could radical honesty be brought to your own process, where you're willing to shine an intimate, tender light on that aspect of being that you would like to reel in, be more accountable to your own integrity with, and consider the 3 or 4 or 5 people in your life that are really important to you on how much it would improve that relationship. So that the meditation is a contextual experience, not just an interior idea. So my point here in the first couple of minutes is to actualize being in Dhamma. We breathe in and out. We don't want to be conceptual yogis, clearly. We want to be embodied beings, embodied consciously. What does the word conscious mean to your integrity? Inform conscious, mindful intelligence. So, halfway through, before we get into something else, one of the most subtle emotions and inner textures of consciousness, to me, is self-honesty, or just pure honesty. Something so reliable about honesty. It's not always easy, is it? Or pleasant. And equally with honesty, I'm just kind of freelancing in this space with you if I can. A lot of honesty is communicated energetically. I mean, you kind of can tell the truth of something if you are kind of really in your heart about it. And it's strange to me to see the foot soldier of deception where I collude with it. I'd like to invite you to see in your notebook and in your own heart how you enact unknowingly or partially aware of the emotion of collusion. I love you. I know you're lying. I don't want to upset the quo because I'm feeling insecure that your new idea of someone, even though it's not consummated, has something in you that's more alive than what I perceive in us. So I don't want to so-called rock the emotional boat. I collude, I act out behind and in your face. I develop a slowly escalating outrage at you, but I still smile and I still make love with you and I still allow you to touch my beautiful heart. But I'm colluding and I'm crumbling and my heart's becoming more stone-like. Collusion is an insidious foot soldier of self-denigration. At least been my experience. Call it enabling the patterns of fear, shame, worry. Without a relationship, a mindfully intelligent yogi, Dharma, Dhamma-based relationship to the texture of collusion, we're not really holding ourselves at a higher standard. And the opposite of collusion is what I would call the emergence of courage. The courage that your feeling of what truth is in yourself modified by non-blame as much as possible, because people are afraid to tell the truth because it's going to even, shake the foundation of already a shaky home. So there's suitability, timing, context, tonality. We talked about the meditation of right speech, all the components of that. So when we become more adept to come out of the opposite of radical honesty, which is colluding with shadowed deception, it requires both courage and also skillfulness. Fair enough? You can see how we're talking about kind of a collective psychology of consciousness that allows for the beautification of mind. I use the word mindfully intelligent awareness for a reason. I'm not trying to be overly intellectual, but without being specific with the nuances of language to felt realities, we live in the world of possibly inhabiting dogmas and missing the point. So I'm inviting greater subtlety through the meditation of shared space. A couple of stories, and then we'll get into what I want to really invite today is collective trust, collective safety, collective integrity, group conscience, and holding each other with higher reverence and support for the emergence of the courage to share, to speak up, to question, to want to talk, to inquire. It's not just me, but we have, look at our brothers and sisters here, which is really beautiful and rare to have, that people are taking time from their lives to commune together, to be in sacred space. I want to use this space, elevate this space, sanctify this space with more us. One of my dearest friends, she was a former nun in Burma, American, Ingrid Yort. You might want to read one of her books called the mindfulness, the mass lay mindfulness movement in Myanmar. JORDT. She outlines the emergence of the practice of mindfulness historically throughout the country of Burma, brought into present day context. And today I'm able to speak about it, and those of you who have it in your life are able to speak about it primarily because of those boys and girls in the earlier years in Myanmar bringing it out of the monasteries and bringing it into lay society. The monastery that I lived in was started by the former Prime Minister of Burma, U Nu. And the intention was to take it out of the container of monasticism and nuns and monks and bring it in a more non-denominational way to the transformation of human consciousness and context everywhere, which I find quite interesting. If just an aside, if I can, in the early years, when my teacher, Mahasi Sayadaw, was first forming these teachings for lay society primarily, the idea of retreating really wasn't a concept. People lived, and to retreat from life was more of a monastic vocation. But here they wanted to transcend that type of segregation, if you will, or that kind of hierarchical apartheid, that it's meant for those who renounce the world rather than those who live in the world. So if you couldn't renounce, you couldn't really practice in the way that those who did renounce could practice. So they reversed that concept to wherever you are, there you find yourself. And so that's where I sit and stand today. And so the teachings became one of wherever you are, there you find yourself. What will you do with it? So the teachings were encouraged to wherever you are, what you're doing, how will you do it? So you had people who tended to the rice fields, you had consummate heroin and opium, compulsive users, you had drinkers who used the alcohol on an excessive level, you had soldiers. Burma is fraught with many civil wars over many decades. You had pastors. It's a heavy Christian country as well as a Buddhist country. You had Islam and you had mosques. You had all walks of life doing all kinds of things, so-called embracing wherever you are, there you find yourself, what will you do? And that's the sort of sequence of mindful intelligence being brought forth in your life without the need to think that there's a better place to do it. So if you can kind of unhook yourself from that kind of specialized context that isn't empowering to who you are, where you are, the way you're sitting and moving, well, if you can do that, all of a sudden you find yourself in, oh my God, I had to be accountable. I've got to be real. I've got to make good on the terms of being a yogi. I can't wait for my 4 o'clock class today with the teacher I'm sort of only semi-turned on to do a sequence of asanas that sort of I could do better on my own, but I want the group. Normal. Rather than, I'm a being in relationship, I have 5 or 6 people I consider my tribe, I have a principal partner that's sort of maybe going somewhere, maybe not, but I am a yogi. I am a Dharma savant. I'm a Dhamma savant. Wherever I am, there I find myself, what will I do? Mahasi Sayadaw taught people to bring mindful intelligence to whatever they did. The key point, interrupt the momentum forward. That's where the habits stay very intact. That's why when you go to meditation centers, and those of you who are coming to Burma, how many of you are thinking of coming to Burma? I really think it's a beautiful thing. It's on my website, January 31st to the 9th. It's also offered freely by the monastery. There's no need for anything except being there, the food, the shelter. We have a tour after that. But one of the beautiful things is that wherever you are, there you find yourself. In other words, all states, all contexts, all postures, all times. All states, all postures, all contexts, all times. So you see people practicing all states. They'll ask you, what did you feel when you moved your arm? And they'll make you sit there, encourage you to be there, to occupy that arm. In other words, it's not just a yogic practice of embodying physical sensations or embodied mindfulness. The real interesting intelligence for me is the embodiment of integrity. Radical honesty, remember? I ask you right now, how willing are you, I'm including myself, to recommit, a rededication to the vocation of why I'm a yogi, a meditator, a Dhamma, Dharma savant, is I want to live in more embodied, not presence, embodied, dignified integrity within presence. Yeah? Because without honesty, who are we? Without it, what are our relationships defined by? Coupled with honesty, what are the various fragrances, beauties of honesty? One of the most beautiful things about being more accountable to honesty is to see the ways in which I've been folded in the past and unaccountable to the vocation of integrity. So you make good on your vocation of historical honesty. Historical honesty. Are you with me on that? That means in great people, they are very transparent. My friend, I made a very subtle error in our relationship. I misled you. Not many people say that. Former partners of mine or my own, I wish I could have said that. I'm misleading you right now. That's a radical act of courage, isn't it? So I encourage us to be really stellar in the area of reconciliation as a fragrance of honesty. update the past so sufficiently that there's nothing to remember. I meet people all the time, publicly as you do, and privately. Often who they are publicly and when they are private are very different people. Usually when they're private, there is a wellspring of information that needs to be shared. And because I'm somewhat of a receptive person, they think that I'm there to listen to the receptivity of their historical transgressions, struggles, complexities. Sometimes I am. I'm very good about boundaries, and I know the same is applying to you. It's amazing to me how good we are in private and how compromised we can be in public. And equally how compromised we can be in private with someone who's most important to us. So it's a kind of weird duality, if you will. I would ask you, where could I be more accountable to my historical transgressions? I would like to encourage all of us in this room and anyone online, let's update so sufficiently there's nothing to remember. There's no lie or transgression to remember. And now mind you, you don't have to go back to the person, but this is where self-accountability is 99% of the issue. Do it for yourself. You know, come truthful, come clean for yourself. Keep that notebook absolutely secure. Bury those things that you're writing now so that no one sees them. Protect it with all of your soul and might if you need to. But be so proud that you've resurrected history to the point where you're now the flower opening rather than investing in the darkness of a flower closed. Beautification. Are you okay with this? Yeah? Sorry to be so evangelical about this, but it's really a big deal to me. I think it's probably because I've been on both sides of the flower. My friend Ingrid, among many super talents, perhaps the brightest person I've ever met on the planet, among some amazingly bright people, she was one of the principal trainers, if you may remember years back, of these two remarkable creatures called Coco and Michael. Coco and Michael were gorillas, and they were brought into captivity based upon hardships in their lives, and they were brought to Santa Cruz with the principal trainer, I forget her name at the moment, or the principal caretaker, and Ingrid supported these two massive creatures, which she took me to. I don't know if anyone has ever seen them on film or been in their company. Massive creatures, like 900 pounds. And you talk about alpha beings, over the top energy. The irony, the interesting thing about it, they trained them on how to speak with their hands. And I think one or both of them had upwards of 3,000 different symbols that they knew. Coco. I mean, imagine that. And so they were there, and she's telling me about the history and the present time of Michael and Coco. And one of the gorillas, she mentions, had communicated in an exchange on how he lived with deep sadness. And how, as a child, in the jungles, the white man came, as I understand it, and killed my mother. And he would describe what white man was, and he would describe his sadness by Michael cry. Think of that level of radical honesty. Think about the intelligence of just emoting within his own process. I don't know whether he went into plant medicine healing to deal with that trauma, but I found it remarkable as a way to support me in actualizing the integrity on the felt level of complex emotions, which without feeling often become the unrecognized motivation for the opposite of self-honesty. There's something about thinking that if I relive a more self-reflective honesty, something bad will happen. And so feeling our complexity and sharing that more with each other, it's not just me being honest about you. I don't really want to hear what you think about me. I really don't. I do too much of that on my own. What I want to hear more about is how you think about yourself that isn't only historical, that's present time context awakening. What you're learning in our company about yourself, I find very interesting. And it could refer back to past relationships or present time context. Point one, second story, a little bit more personal, kind of reveals a little bit more of who I've been in my life. But there was a time when I felt like I was sort of walking on water. I had disrobed, I had forgotten the monastery, I was somewhat successful, I had 100, sometimes 150 people at a 10-day retreat or even up to a 3-month meditation retreat from all walks of life, very well-known psychiatrists. The Dalai Lama had endorsed books of mine. I was somebody. And I felt it. I had a great house in Larkspur Canyon near Mill Valley in San Francisco. I had friends come and stay. I took them to dinner. I had money. I even could have had a platinum card. I chose not to. I was somebody. And as a result of this, and I think other men in the room, I don't know, a few men here, maybe some women too, when you're in the kind of prime of your power, the prime of your looks, the prime of your energy, the prime of your hormones, there's a kind of imperviousness that comes with success. It's not entitlement or shadow, it's just sort of natural maturity. Fair enough? I don't want to judge it. But one of the ways in which I found the joys of my life, personally, were with women. I just grew up with women. My mom had 6 sisters. My grandmother had 6 sisters. And we had, I can't count the number of girl cousins, that we were all hanging out so often together. I had my aunts manicuring one hand and another one on another hand and another one on my shoulders, and my grandmother there being so mystically stoic, who was so gorgeous, so amazing, even when she died at 100. I fell in love with her beauty. So it just comforted me, and really odd for me was sexuality in the early years. I was very shy. And I acted out, even just a couple of years ago, from images. I woke up one day, just a personal story, I woke up one day about 3 years ago and realized that my sexual iconography was very welded to being like a 17-year-old. I had no mindful relationship to the imagery that turned me on, and my heart was a very mature man at the age of like 65, but my sexuality was very discordant with my awareness of myself. I don't know if that applies to any of you here. It's a much more awake culture today that's younger. So I changed that very radically. And so I noticed in my day back, I don't know when it was, exactly the time frame, but there were a lot of interesting women in my life, and a number of them were intimate relationships. And I was single, I was open, and women were single, they were open. It's sort of what you do, right? And the word polyamory didn't even apply then. You're just kind of like doing girl and boy. So I was in therapy full-time. I was in full-time ecstasy therapy. I was in full-time psychotherapy in Marin County. Everyone was sort of in the emergence of therapy. And my therapist, an older woman who I consciously chose, Alyssa Hall, a beautiful mind, we would talk openly about these different women in my life. She thought there was some need to understand the constellation of the feminine. And I kind of like, okay, great, it's nothing wrong with that. And she one day, after about a year and a half of like once a week therapy, she said, Alan, I want you to invite all these women into the room. And I just immediately went back to like a 4-year-old. No way I'm bringing these women into one room. There's no way in hell you can do that, Alyssa. She says, Alan, I don't mean to bring them physically into the room. I want you to bring them with integrity into the room. And I immediately go like, what? What does integrity mean here? I want you to become less compartmentalized with your experience so that you can be more transparent and enjoy what you're doing rather than compartmentalizing it. Are you with me? Is this okay? Too personal? No? So she had me over the course of 3 or 4 sessions bring the principal women into my life. Some I was intimate with, some I wasn't intimate with. And she had me, encourage me, which I did very volitionally, talk to each of the women in my life. And I found that I couldn't really say much, even to the ones that I knew in what we talked about individually, because I didn't want the others to overhear them. Now, I don't know about you, but when we talk about the word holism and integration, reconciliation, transparency, are you with me? You're just full of shit if you can't bring in your whole tribe, and if you can't say something to this gentleman and to this lady. There's something a little bit, to me, a little bit, maybe a little bit more than a little bit weird. You're not like really trustworthy. That means what you're telling me, you might like tell someone else and not tell me what you told them about me. It might be that you're telling someone else about them and you're not really fucking reliable. Get with the truth. You're not fucking absolute fucking scumbag. You're apartheid junkie. Your integrity is compartmentalized. That's my only point. I invite you. Where are you compartmentalized? And so I would encourage you on paper, who are the men and women in your life called your intimates? And radical honesty, transparency, reconciliation, integration. Become more free in your yoginess, in your Dharma. Go back to these individuals, if needed, at least on paper. Reconcile, elevate, engage, embrace, go into the future in peace, so we don't have to forget things. When I meet you, I don't have to remember what I said to Jennifer. I know what I said to her, and I know what I said to you. Alan, is there anything that you have said about me with someone else that you would feel ashamed of? I find that a very valid question. Really super cool. To the point where trust now is deeper than collusion. Are you with me? Point done. The last point, and we'll open it up with the questions after a short little break. One of my most beloved friends passed away. A few years back, he was one of my mentors and absolutely beloved friends. And he came to a retreat of mine back in '84. And we just hit it off. It was like really cool. And at the time, you may know, this was like in the early '80s, there was the emergence of various forms of psychotherapy using various forms and substances, and one of them was the whole realm of the MDMA. Leo Zeff in San Francisco initiated it, and long before it became a recreational and picked up the acronym of ecstasy, it was purely a therapeutic medicine, transformation, revolution, relational experience. And I find the empowerment of relational Dharma, relational awakening. Meditation is one thing. I can do it till the end of the world, it seems like. I can sit with myself. I grew up alone in a bedroom, soft and under a bed. I learned at one point in my monastic life, post-monastic life, I was recreating my own childhood a lot of the time. I had a very militant father, often would ask me to sit up straight while I ate. Same thing in a monastery. I had a very militant teacher. It's amazing how these patterns continue. And Bob was one of the first non-psychotherapists to truly, as a man, talk to me in a really, really humanly honest way. I don't know about other men in the room, I won't ask you right now, or other women, but self-honesty is one thing, but when you've got brothers, you want to develop relationships that are non-collusive. Bob was one who was radically transparent and honest, and he invited honesty because he was so courageous in sharing the unfolding of his own soul. I found that so interesting. Anyway, we did 5 or 6 years, every 3 months, of these taped sessions where we would sit down in his living room in Malibu for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours and just sit there with various things that I'm saying that we did to help facilitate defenselessness, transparency, and high mindful intelligent curiosity. And among all of those 30 or 40 8-hour sessions, we put into a book. There's 2 of them on the planet. He's now long gone. I picked it up recently for the first time in over 30 years and read some of those passages. Very much like these notebooks that you're writing. That was just one of the books for me, and I looked in there, and one line which made me cry, he said, "Alan, no one has the right to judge another person's relationship." And there was just something in that that so validated why I often didn't tell the truth. And I started to look more and more carefully at all the relationships that I concealed from my own honesty. My addiction at times to sex workers, my addictions to cocaine, my addiction to alcohol, as a child, my addictions to masturbation, the deceptions that I perceived in myself in meditation, the deceptions I saw in other elite teachers and how they colluded with their own lies. There was so much I was holding. No one has the right to judge it. And all I was doing was I was seeing the truth, but I was judging it. And that relaxed that inner hold on me, that's my point, of like, I don't need to be self-judgmental of these things. I can be more transparent with them because I'm unfolding God's shadow. If it's not you or me, who's going to do it? We don't want to live walking into the future backwards. We want to create more of a sacred garden where to the whole range of human behaviors and taking the demonization out of them. It's normal that we have sexual instincts. No one ultimately knows, as much as I make jokes about it, no one really knows whether we're inbuilt to be polyamorous or polygamous or to be monogamous. Who knows? And so I think normalization here is a very key phrase, is my point. Normalize your interior. Transparency and ethics are one thing, but create not a sacred garden, but a safe one. Hi, how are you? What do you feel? So I invite you today, enough from me. We'll take a little bit of a break here and for about 10 minutes, and I'm going to invite you before we take a break. I'm going to say this is really your time. I've talked a lot. I would like to minimize as we go into the future. I'd like to now turn it over to you a lot of the time. And may I encourage you as you feel into your own personal life. Issues are normal. Convulsions are normal. Difficulties are normal. If there are things that you want to share that are confessional, you've got a sacred space to redeem that place with courageous bravado, with tenderness and vulnerability. If you want to seek a dialogue, I'm here for that. But we have a collective dialogue as well. So may I invite you, please reflect on how sacred it is to be in each other's company, to invest even more, especially if you've been here on a regular basis, to drop in. We've just begun. Feel into who are you, where do you want to go, where do you want to open your flower, where do you want to see the more nuanced areas of your beauty. Speak about your personal relationships, your fears, your phobias, about Burma, about meditation. Anything at all, it's your time. And please, I can't encourage you any more than I'm encouraging you. Take the risk of Uparle. He came out of 6 years of hard labor. I've been waiting for this moment for 6 long years. He stood in front of 400 people with the certainty of knowing they were likely to go to prison and that he would too. But freedom is more important than fear. It's an epic example. So let's take something close to a smaller version of that, but the courage to care of our own interior evolution. May I invite you during this 10 minutes, what would you like to talk about? What would you like to share? What would you like to discover and bring forth to the sacredness of this group? So take time, I'll let you know in about 10 minutes, and we'll carry on. Thank you.